Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Dead Sea Formation, Dead Sea Hash Formation Theories. Contact Report 230.
The Dead Sea is not really an ocean, but a salt lake without runoff with a lot of potash salt and bromine salt, whereby the total concentration is to be calculated with 33% in the so-called Jordan Trench. As you know, it is in Arabic language,
called Al-Bahar al-Majid.
That is what I was about to say. The Hebrew name is Yam Hamala, for Dead Sea, which, however, is also known to you. The lake is 15 kilometers wide and 80 kilometers long and covers an area of 1,020 square kilometer. Due to the peninsula Lisan, as well as due to solid sediments of salt, the lake, that is to say the Dead Sea, is divided into a small basin in the south and a large basin in the north. The Dead Sea is about 400 meters deep, and the bottom of the Dead Sea lies at the deepest point 829 meters below sea level, which is the deepest depression on Earth. The origin of the Dead Sea can be traced back to a primeval earthquake, during which the salty and partly rocky earth was deeply torn open and formed a deep canyon, in which in the course of time many waters accumulated, especially through the very ancient Jordan, which flows into the Salt Lake in the north.
Dead Sea Scrolls, or Essenes. Contact Report 236.
What is actually up with the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls? Quetzal explained to me in 1985, just like Sfath shortly before his departure, that at the beginning of the year 1947, a nomadic shepherd had found ancient scrolls from the time before Emmanuel's birth in a cave near the village or place of Khirbet Qumran by the Dead Sea. However, neither Quetzal nor Sfath told me more details about it. Can you tell me more about it? I read somewhere that the scrolls of Emmanuel or so are ascribed.
The scrolls of Qumran at the Dead Sea do not represent the history and teaching of Emmanuel, but rather of a self-appointed, megalomaniacal and self-glorifying Jewish scribe, referred to as Son of God and highest of all angels, by the name of Menahem. He was a revolutionary who mixed the old teachings of the Bible with new ideas and with his own ideas, and, in this context, in a self-proclaimed manner, called himself prophet and referred his followers, with regard to his person, to the testimony of the prophet Isaiah regarding the coming Messiah, whereby he saw himself as this Messiah. As a result of his actions and his delusion, he was rejected by the Pharisaic scribes and was ultimately pursued and threatened with death. Menahem, the self-proclaimed prophet, founded the Essenes sect, which was also known at that time as the Qumran sect. He was their supreme leader and maintained that he was the Son of God, and he related Isaiah's statements about the sufferings, the life, the crucifixion, and the alleged resurrection from the dead, which was announced by former prophets in reference to Emmanuel, to himself, and disseminated this. Then, he actually became ostracized and pursued, in order to be murdered then in Jerusalem by Roman soldiers, after which he was left lying in an alleyway for 3 days, before he was taken and buried by sect members. He had assembled 160 disciples around himself, who then invented and spread the alleged story of the resurrection and the ascension after some time. The false prophet, in an arrogant and megalomaniacal manner, called himself the Beloved and the Companion of the King, and by this he meant God King. Thus, in his delusion, he presumed himself as the chosen Messiah and saw himself seated on the throne in the council of the gods and angels, so therefore also seated in heaven at the right hand of God. Unlike Emmanuel, who never called himself Messiah, who also did not see himself as such and who forbade his disciples from ever calling him such, Menahem was eager to be regarded, respected, and revered as Messiah. And when, in the future, it will be claimed by those who are ignorant that Emmanuel had received the teachings of Menahem, which will happen in the foreseeable time, it will not only represent falsehood, but also defamation and slander against Emmanuel and the true teaching. Emmanuel did not receive or continue on a tiny piece of the self-styled sect leader, for the truth is that the prophet Menahem, out of his own grace and as a stroke of fate, encountered the secret, old traditional teaching of the Spirit, which was reported to him in an oral manner. It was the true teaching, as taught by the ancient prophets, and then also taught by Emmanuel in the execution of his mission, and also in detail to certain parts, according to the instructions of Gabriel and several others who were involved in the affair. From this, it cannot and may not in any way be said in the coming time that Emmanuel had used Menahem's teachings for his own purposes. Such an assertion corresponds to a bad misrepresentation of the actual truth. In the coming time, a large number of books will be written about the Qumran scrolls, but these won't contain the facts, unfortunately, but rather untenable theories and assertions, etc. And thus, not the truth and not the real connections, and these won't reveal the reality. But back to the false prophet, Menahem. He had succumbed to the delusion that he had reached a superhuman state, where he saw himself as immune to carnal desires and as standing over every possible capacity for physical suffering, and he also said this. A nonsense that he also preached all around, not just within his sect. In equal measure, he also presumed himself as the most glorious in magnificence person and, at the same time, the most despicable person on earth, but only despicable in the eyes of his adversaries. In his delusion, he also presumed himself as absolutely infallible and as elevated above the whole world, as this is found as a parallel with the Pope. Furthermore, he was so blinded and arrogant in his delusion that he himself described his false teachings and speeches as absolutely incomparable. In very great measure, he glorified himself and saw himself not only as Messiah and prophet, but also as God himself.
So Emmanuel had no connection at all with the Qumran sect, respectively with the Qumran Essenes sect.
That corresponds to what I explained.